Hello, listeners. Do you like scary movies? What's your favorite scary movie? It's going to be a Scream. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. After so many times you've heard our iconic opening, this is a little different, but my name is Eric Creech. We have Kyle Whitley and Ashby Barrymore. We're here hosting the What podcast holiday season. Oh my goodness, this is weird. So this is actually the first one we're recording. It's going to be second in our when it's released. Little behind the scenes tidbit for you listeners. But this is the first time we're actually recording in over a month. So we're trying to work all the kinks out. And I think
feels good.
It does. It feels good.
Yeah,
it does.
We were supposed to start
closer together. We got a new table.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
we were supposed to start 54 minutes ago. And
Look,
we haven't seen each other in so long.
On
You're
brand.
we need to talk.
On brand.
We are on brand.
Mm-hmm.
So we're very excited for our holiday season episodes. Last week we discussed our favorite Halloween songs. Today we are discussing Scream, our first rated R movie.
Yep.
We're growing up, ladies and gentlemen.
I finally reached that pinnacle that I was climbing towards.
That of adulthood there. Yes.
Yeah, to make this a non-family friendly podcast.
You finally done it. Well, before we get into all that, I need you to know there are certain rules that one must abide by in order to successfully survive this podcast. First of all, you need to subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever it is you get your podcasts. And of course, you need to rate and review us. We only accept 5 stars, or we'll call you asking what your favorite scary movie is. So please do that. Secondly, please follow us on social media. You can find us on Facebook. You can find us on Instagram. You can even find us on YouTube by searching for What the What Media.
All one word.
And you can also find us on the Twitters, on Twitter, at WTW_media. And we would love that if you would, share this with your friends, please. Please
Let your friends know about this.
Please.
That's right.
Yes.
Call them.
So,
stalk them.
As we mentioned earlier, we are discussing the 1996 horror classic. It's 25 years old this year.
I'd say it's a classic.
It's a classic.
Wow. That makes me feel old.
The movie Scream, directed by Wes Craven. And as always, this is your spoiler warning. You haven't seen Scream? Well, don't listen.
Haven't you?
Why haven't you at this point?
It came out in 1996.
I mean, they're coming out with Scream 5.
Come on, people.
In January 2022.
Yeesh.
Okay? You need to catch up on all the Screams, in my opinion. But definitely make sure you watch this movie because we will be spoiling the heck out of it. So, yeah.
We'll be spilling its guts.
We will. Ooh.
That's right. Ooh. Yeah.
Ooh. Well, Kyle, as they say in the movie, live her alone.
Liver.
Get it?
Liver.
I made a joke. All right. So
liver.
Read the room, man.
Read the room, man. Read the room. So let's dive into our recap of what happened in Scream. I'm not even looking at the.
I'm not either.
At the synopsis right now, I didn't watch it this week. I'm actually waiting for Halloween season to watch this, but I remember it so vividly because it's one of my favorites. So we're gonna go from the beginning. In Scream, you have a young Casey Beckwith, I believe is her name. She's played by Drew Barrymore, who's prominently featured on
the marketing.
All the marketing. We'll talk about that when we get to everything. But she answers the phone, and there's a mysterious voice on the other end. Wants to know, if she's home alone, what's her favorite scary movie. She's about to watch a movie, and this guy starts threatening her. I want to see who I'm looking at. I want to see who I'm talking to, or And so she locks the door. She's freaked out. He calls back, says, "Hey, you hang up on me again, I'm gonna kill you." She looks outside. Her boyfriend is tied up, and the killer gives her, horror night trivia, scary movie trivia. You get it right, you live. If you don't, you die. And she gets one wrong. Who's the killer in Friday the 13th? Was it Jason? Was it Jason?
Apparently
No.
not.
Oh.
It was Mrs. Voorhees who was the killer in the original Friday the 13th. Jason didn't come until the sequel. We're spoiling all the horror movies this
I was about to say,
time.
I would not have gotten that right.
Oh, but luckily for Casey, there was a bonus question, but her boyfriend, Stephen Orr, gets killed. And her bonus question was, which door is he standing at? And she doesn't know how to answer. The killer chases her around the house, catches up with her in the yard. She's trying to call her parents, and he stabs her and drags her and hangs her in one of the most scary, gruesome, the scariest image I remember from my childhood is seeing Drew Barrymore hanging from a tree in her own yard. Literally gave me nightmares as a kid because this movie came out when I was 10. So,
What were you doing seeing an R-rated
I was
movie
going to say,
at 10
how did
years
you
old?
watch this at 10?
don't tell my parents. But I had friends who had older siblings who we watched this in the middle of the day though. So
That's fair.
but still,
That's fair.
Still scary. So fast forward, we have Sydney Prescott, who lives with her dad. Her mom was killed a year prior. They believe they caught the killer, Cotton Weary. He's on trial for Maureen Prescott's murder.
What a
Sydney's
bad
mom.
guy name.
Cotton Weary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I love, spoiler alert, he ends up in the third movie as a celebrity. He has his own talk show called 100% Cotton. So,
Thanks, I hate it.
yes, of course. And Sydney's boyfriend sneaks into her window, and they're talking about their relationship. Things are getting steamy. I should have put like a little adult content warning at the beginning of this episode. I'm realizing now.
Oh, yeah, we definitely should have.
Very adult
We
things
said
happening.
it was rated R.
Yeah, there are very adult things happening in this movie, by the way.
Yes. And lots of. Never mind.
So Sydney goes to school, and anytime there's any kind of tragedy at school, they bring in police officer, grief counselors.
Lots of media.
Lots of media's there. You see Courtney Cox's Gail Weathers. She's not a meteorologist.
Could have fooled me.
Could have
great
fooled me
name
with
for
that
one,
name, though. She's reporting. She's someone who wrote a book on the Woodsboro murders from the year prior, talking about Cotton Weary, where she has a theory that Cotton was framed and that Sydney misidentified her mom's killer. But Sydney goes to school, hangs out with her friends, and they're talking about the murders. And the city is just or the town is just, devastated because there's been 2 losses of life. And what are you doing?
I'm just letting you know I was on post social media,
Wow. Well, you need to warn somebody before you do.
No, this is all
No,
subtle.
this is,
They would have never known, but now you've said it.
I know. Well, anyway, so Sydney goes home. She's going to go. Her dad's going out of town. She's going to spend the night with her friend. And her friend's brother, Dewey, is a sheriff's officer or deputy. Not necessarily the sheriff himself, but a deputy. And she gets a phone call waiting for her friend to come pick her up. And she's like, I just got to the video store. I'm thinking Tom Cruise, all the right moves, whatever. And
yeah, if you pause it just right, you can see.
Whoa.
Whoa! I wasn't going to go there, but you're right. Well, then the phone rings, and she's like, Tatum, just pick a movie and go. And on the voice on the other end is like, hello? Who is this? And it turns out to be the killer. And the killer's in Sydney's house. And Sydney is like, she hates horror movies. She tells the guy, look, horror movies are so stupid. I mean, it's always some dumb bimbo who, opens the door and then runs up the stairs when she could be walking out the front door, Well, then she does just that. She gets chased up the stairs, and her boyfriend is climbing up the window, and it's like, I'm here now. And a cell phone falls out of his pocket. And she all of a sudden gets this scare, like, was it you? Because 1996, who had a cell phone in 1996? Okay.
I don't know. Did you?
Oh,
You were
excuse me.
10 and saying R-rated movies.
Yeah.
Did you have a cell phone?
Let me rephrase. Who had a cellular phone in
That's true.
1996?
That's different.
Right, yeah.
Because that's what they refer to them in this movie. So the cops come. Actually, the cops were already there. Dewey is like, he found the mask, and he's like, I found this, and they're checking it out. He's reading Billy, the boyfriend, his rights. You have the right to remain silent. You have the right to an attorney. Anything you can be, just doing the whole cop thing.
Right.
And Billy's like, I didn't do it, Sydney. I didn't do it. It wasn't me, Sydney. And they take him to the police station, and they're questioning, what are you doing to sell your phone, son? Well, everyone has one. And they're doing a trace on the number that called Sydney's house to see if they can figure out who it is. And Sydney's staying with Tatum and Dewey and her mom that night. She gets another phone call. The next day, they are at school and they're talking about how they're going to put a curfew. So there's going to be a curfew over the city at sundark. There's going to be this big party at Stu's house, one of their friends, Stu Mocker. Mm-hmm. And they're planning, this big party for all these high school kids after dark. Lots of drinking, lots of, just bad stuff. All bad stuff, y'all.
That's right.
Yes, don't do all that. And Sydney really doesn't want to go, but she goes because Tatum's going. And meanwhile, the principal, he gets killed at the school, played by Henry Winkler, the Fonz. He gets killed at the school. And there's just this big mystery of who the killer is. Who is the killer?
There's a lot of red herrings.
A lot of red herrings in this movie. Well, they get there.
There's some blonde and browns, too.
Yes, there is. Billy shows up to the party because he was invited by Stu. Billy's trying to apologize to Sydney. Their friend Randy, played by Jamie Kennedy, this big movie buff. He talks about the rules in horror movies. Mm-hmm. He says, first of all, you can never drink or do drugs. They're all drinking. Yeah. He says, you can't have sex because if you do, you'll die. And then you can't say, I'll be right back. Because if you say that, you won't be back. You'll be dead.
And then Stu says,
I'll be right back.
Be right back.
Well, at the party, Tatum gets killed. That's Dewey's sister and Sydney's best friend. She gets killed in the garage. She puts up a heck of a fight.
Yeah, she does. Get it, Rose McGowan.
I know. Love Rose McGowan. Billy and Sydney... Sydney forgives Billy, and they take their relationship to a non-PG-13 relationship.
The next level.
The next level, right there in Stu's parents' bedroom. He goes, that's romantic. And, And then the killer shows up and kills Billy. I mean, and he's got blood everywhere, and Sydney, she's just freaking out, and she runs. Gail is there at the party. Gail Weathers, she's trying to, spy on the party because she figures something's going to happen. She runs into Officer Dewey. They take a walk. They can't find Sydney's dad. They're trying to get in touch with him, but they find his car ran off the road. Turns out the calls were from his cell phone. Just so many things pointing to Sydney's dad being the killer here. They run back to the house. The party's kind of broken up. Randy's still there, and it turns out that Billy's not actually dead. It turns out that Billy and Stu are the killers. And it turns out, not only were they the killers for all the killings in this movie, they also killed Sydney's mom a year earlier because Sydney's mom had broken up Billy's dad and mom's marriage by sleeping with Billy's dad. And so that was Billy's motive, Stu's motive was, peer pressure.
It's a weak motive.
Peer
Stu's
pressure.
motive is even weaker. I think
pressure.
really they're just absolute psychos.
That's exactly what it is. Well, Sydney ends up getting the upper hand and saving the day. She ends up taking care of Billy and Stu. And
she has help from Gail.
Yep, a little help from Gail Weathers.
And Randy,
who ends up getting shot.
Right.
But he ends up surviving. Dewey, who ends up getting shot, he ends up surviving.
Yeah.
And
Gail's cameraman doesn't
not
survive.
so much. Sorry.
Sydney's dad.
Sydney's dad does survive. So we do have a few survivors in this movie. And the movie ends with Gail reporting from the house.
That's right.
And
looking like a hot mess.
Randy, I think, is holding the camera. Who's a champ? He got shot the night before. He's holding the camera. Just like, okay. So that's how the movie ends, with Sydney finding out who the killers are. Cotton Weary is going to end up being released in the second one since he didn't commit the murder of Sydney's mom.
Does he forgive Sydney?
I think so. We'll have to watch Scream 2.
I know. Now I want to know what happens.
Well,
I almost started last night.
I almost started the second one.
Yeah.
Scream 2 is good. Scream 3 is not great, but you need to watch. Scream 4 is actually really good.
Interesting. Okay.
And the funny thing. So let's go ahead and dive into what worked the best in this movie. This movie is, in a way, a parody of the horror genre that all came before it. It's a big whodunit mystery. It's a slasher film. It's you got all the elements, but it's meta. They're talking about horror movies in the horror movie.
Yes.
They're talking about the rules of surviving a horror movie, and then they turn those rules on top of their head.
Right. When Randy's like, look behind you, behind
you.
And the killer's right behind him.
I mean, it's...
I'm going to be really honest. I got really into horror movies in high school, and I vividly remember watching I Know What You Did Last Summer for the first time. And I know that I've seen bits and pieces of probably Scream 1 and Scream 2, maybe not 3 and 4. But as I started watching this, I thought maybe some like sense memory would come back. From start to finish, I literally had no clue what was going to happen. It was like watching it for the first time. And it really holds up. I mean, the fashion doesn't because it's like peak 90s.
Well, it's 90s.
But,
cellular phones and, calling 911 on your computer.
Right.
Really high tech for 1996. Mm-hmm. Not so much now.
Right.
But
it was really good though. It was very enjoyable.
What did you think, Kyle?
I'm a little bit different from you guys, where Eric saw it when he was 10. Ashby saw it at some other point. Growing up, we didn't watch scary movies at our house, and I don't know, like, it made me think about, I talked with Erica, my wife, a lot about this last night because we watched it together, where I don't think it was a thing where my mom was very strict on, like, no horror movies, but I just don't think it was something that she enjoyed or my dad.
Right.
So we just didn't watch them. And then, honestly, like, I didn't have friends like Eric did, evidently, that could get me in, 9 years old when this came out. So, I didn't watch a lot of stuff like this until I got older. But I married a lady that loves all horror movies and things. So this is what we watch now. If I don't pick something, which is awesome. I've come to really like these movies as well. There's also part of it, like you were talking about, like I Know What You Did Last Summer and some other ones that there's just stuff like that I didn't see growing up until I probably I was in 2000 was like 7th grade for me, 99, 2000. So in those, that's when I started going to the movies with friends, somewhere in middle school. So I didn't see a lot of this stuff. So now there's a part of me that even though stuff is very 90s in this movie, where like say the clothing or say other things, I just love it. Like I go back and watch all these movies, like Scream, especially with just anything that came out in the 90s. Sure, some stuff doesn't hold up by all means. It definitely doesn't. But not necessarily here, but in that genre in general. But there's something about it to know that was part of your life and your childhood, and it's nostalgic. And I didn't see a lot of it. With all that said, come back to Scream. I didn't see Scream until probably at least in the last 10 years at some point with Erica. I think it was when the 4th one came out, because didn't they It
came out in 2011.
Yeah, so 2011, that one was coming back out. Her and her friend Jade were used to do scary movie nights where they would rent a pizza and watch scary movies together. So whenever this was coming out, they were super excited. So with that, I had to go back and watch all of them before to find out what in the world we're even talking about here. To not skip over Scream, I really loved the movie. Last night I was the same way, where it's been a while since I watched it. So I really didn't remember who the killer was. I didn't remember much about it. Certain things would pop up and I kind of remember. But something that's a real struggle for me is in 2000, another movie came out called Scary Movie,
yes.
which was a spoof on all the different scary movies from this time period.
Yes.
So there's part of it that's really hard for me because I saw that so many times and didn't see this.
Right. So then when you see Ghostface, it's almost like your brain can't take it seriously.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So as soon as I see him, I imagine the what's up with the tongue hanging out of the face. And there's just so many parts of Scary Movie that I keep waiting to happen in Scream, and it doesn't happen.
When he's hiding behind the couch.
Yeah.
Where am I? You're behind my couch.
Yeah. And so there's so much of it that's not even necessarily the goofy part, but just parts in your brain that it's hard to distinguish. This was the spoof movie. This was the real movie. Because something I really like about this movie too is Ghostface isn't some invincible monster, say that Michael Myers is, or Jason Voorhees is, or Freddy Krueger. You've got a guy that multiple times falls over, that he gets hit with things. He gets hit with a freezer door and falls down. He's not some perfect, indestructible horror killer that's out. Whereas you see that in a lot of scary movies that sometimes they move really slow, but you're not going to stop them. They're constantly indestructible.
Right, yeah. Or there's a supernatural quality to them. Whereas he clearly... But it's interesting because at the end you find out that, Ghostface is two people.
Sure.
And that teenage boys.
Yes.
Yes.
So, like, it makes sense then.
It does.
You know, like, it was so funny when he was in the bathroom, in the girls' bathroom, and you see the boots and the jeans come down, and then the Ghostface costume comes over it. And it's almost like, you know it's a person in the costume, right? You know he's not actually a supernatural entity. But you're like, now I kind of feel like I've seen under the...
Yeah.
You know, it's very interesting. It was there were some parts to it where I was like, I feel like this movie was doing a lot of things that were sort of like genre breaking in a lot of ways.
For sure.
Well, let's talk about the opening scene.
Yeah, it's great.
Because the opening scene, you Drew Barrymore, by far the biggest name in this cast.
At the time too. She
Definitely
was a
at the
huge
time,
star.
she's a huge name. She plays Casey in that, she's got that white cashmere sweater. She's
Right.
home alone, about to watch a scary movie. She's got popcorn on the stove, which I'd never seen before. That blew my mind.
Like now or at
No,
a
at the
10-year-old
time when I was
you?
Right.
Okay.
You're
Put
like, oh my
popcorn
gosh.
in the microwave.
Yeah, that's old school.
But then the phone rings and things take a turn. She's,
Right.
notwithstanding her boyfriend, because,
Right.
whatever, Stephen Orr. But
Right.
she's Ghostface's first victim.
Right.
Killed in the first 10 minutes of the movie.
she
Barrymore
was
was the
billed
biggest name. She was billed top
On the
billing,
front of the poster.
front of the poster with everybody
Right. The
else.
trailers were cut to make her seem like the main character.
And she was picked off right away,
Right.
which tells you right away,
Right.
Scream's not playing by the rules.
Right, because you can't kill the main character in the first 10 minutes.
Everyone is, everyone's,
It was shocking.
Yeah, everyone could be killed in this movie.
Right.
Nobody's safe. It successfully,
Right.
satirized the cliches and the tropes of the horror genre,
Right.
while still legitimately being thrilling.
Yeah.
And turning it up on its head a little bit.
Right.
You had, the boyfriend, the bad boyfriend, who was obviously going to be a suspect, and then they quote kill him off, which turns out to be fake.
Right. Right.
It's just corn syrup.
Yeah.
Same thing they used for the blood in.
It's also really interesting the way that they used, like we talk about red herrings, and then we realize that some of the red herrings actually weren't red herrings.
Exactly.
And I remember, one of the very first scenes where he's trying to convince her to make out with him basically on the bed, and he comes in through her window and her dad's there, and she's like, "You gotta go," or whatever. I was listening to the music, which was very light in the background, and I was picking up the lyrics, and I was like, that sounds really familiar.
Yes.
And it took me a second, and it's a stripped down acoustic version of Don't Fear the Reaper. And so then you realize at the end of the movie, you're like, okay, so even then,
I totally
they
didn't
were
catch
giving
that
us
then.
hints, right? That Billy was involved.
Like, that part got me so much that I kept thinking about, but I didn't think deep into it. I was just excited to recognize the song and, what it was. Totally didn't.
Right, yeah.
Until now, right this second.
Why
just
would
put
you,
it together.
even though it's an acoustic, slower version of the song, why would you play that song in a scene that's supposed to be romantic? It was so interesting. Like, some of the things they did were really clever.
Absolutely. I really like the idea of last year during when COVID. When I say COVID was at its height, it's back at its height. But when COVID was still new, me and our friend Sean McGovern, I had him come over to watch these movies because he'd never seen them. He's a big horror fan. He's never seen any of them. So we watched Scream. And the whole time, he's trying to figure out who the killer is. It's basically like Clue, but with, gruesome slasher murders. And he was just blown away to find out there's not one killer. There's two killers. Like, that was just, unheard of. At the time, you usually had one killer, and you knew who it was. It was Freddy Krueger. It was Michael Myers, or it was some kind of supernatural entity or whatever. But two killers.
Right.
Just, that blew his mind. Like, oh, I had no idea there was two.
Right.
Like, I think it's the boyfriend. No, I think it's the dad. No, I think it's the police chief. Because there was a red herring that the police chief.
Yeah, and I thought it was the principal for a second, too.
Yeah, the principal, too. I mean, they pointed...
Right.
And even Randy says in the video store, everyone's a suspect.
Right.
And you legitimately thought it could be anybody except for
Yeah, and then Tatum at the very beginning is like, well, it could be a girl.
Yeah.
And Tatum and Stu are arguing over whether a girl could do all that.
Well, and he's like, it takes a man to do something like that. And she's like, or a man's mentality.
Right.
It's like
right.
someone who could try to think, whatever. And so, I mean, literally, the finger could have been pointed to anybody.
Yeah.
And then you look at, if you watch it again after seeing it the first time, you see all those pieces.
Right.
You know, you're trying to piece together, well, who could, which.
Well, and I wasn't sure if we were going to find out because I was thinking, you know, there's 4 screams, right? And so I wasn't sure, like, the fact that at the end of this movie, you think it's tied up in a neat ball, right? Like a neat little ribbon, and it's like everything's done. We figured out who it is, you know. So that's why I was like, well, wait a second. I know that I've seen other Scream movies, so like, then how do they keep the Ghostface thing going? So then I was like, well, now I got to keep watching.
And I'm not going to spoil much about Scream 2, Scream 3, or Scream 4, but I will tell you this. So Scream is a satire, you know, on the entire horror slasher genre. Scream 2 breaks the rules again. It follows up with the rules of sequels. You know, and Randy even says in Scream 2, by definition, they're inferior films.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean,
but like, so, you know, but they have rules for sequels. You
right.
know, the body count, you know, is higher. Anybody can die. Just because you survive the first one doesn't, you know, they literally go in, and then Scream 3 talks about the trilogies. You know, where even like the main, you know, girl or whatever, you know, if it's a trilogy, it's, you know, define, you know, that means it's the end, and that means no one's safe. Not even, you know, Sydney,
right.
you know, whatever, or
right.
whoever. And then Scream 4, which comes out 11 years later, talks about reboots and remakes, and it really flips things on top of itself.
It's all very meta.
And it
which is
really
nice.
It does such a great job with the meta commentary.
It's not too much, right?
On horror, you know, it's on the nose, but not too on the nose. And like I said, Scream 3 is a mess. I still recommend it, like, just for completionists. But in Scream 4, like, I'm really surprised. Like, I know it did a lower intake at the box office or whatever, but Scream 4, in my opinion, is the second best Scream film. And like, it's so good. And,
okay.
Even like me, who studied, you know, loved the films, you know, could usually pick out who the killers are.
Right.
I was legitimately shocked at Scream 4.
Okay.
Like,
now we have to watch it.
Yeah, you need to watch all, you know.
You know what I was thinking about at the end of this movie that was really interesting is, you know, with I Know What You Did Last Summer, Scream, Jason, Freddy, there is this killer that has some kind of motive or purpose or mythology behind it. And when we got to the end of this movie, I was like, oh, no, these guys are just psychopaths. And that's somehow scarier. Like that scene in the kitchen where they're stabbing one another, it was horrifying because you're like, oh, these guys have no regard for human life. Like there's clearly something wrong with them. You know, and that was almost more terrifying.
Sure. Than something supernatural.
Right.
Well, and the thing is, they even, like, there's some meta commentary in that scene, too, where Sydney's like, y'all watch too many scary movies, and they're like, don't blame the movies. Movies don't create psychos. They make psychos more creative.
I mean.
And, like, how can you argue with that? I mean,
right.
Well, back to like, the whole meta thing, too, like, and you briefly talked about it, but I just love how if you're just hearing this, so you haven't watched it, you're just hearing us mention that, all of a sudden that could come across that, oh, this is just cheesy. Like they keep constantly like, well, you can't do this in a movie, so you better, or this is going to happen. Like it's not cheesy at all. Like the way they integrate it, it's like it's in there, and it's kind of just putting it out there for you, but it's done in such a way that even as they're doing it, like you don't take off as like, oh, it's a stupid, cheesy, funny movie. How scary a movie or a spoof movie would be. Like, they really handle this in such a way that, yes, it does call out all these other scary movies. And she even calls that at one point, like, talking about she doesn't like scary movies because they're all so stupid. Because instead of running out the front door, you run upstairs for some reason or whatever else. And it's the same way. Like, you feel frustrated watching some of these scary movies. Like, why are you running up the stairs?
Right.
Why are you in the dark? Like, all these dumb things that you would not do. You know, and so they don't. So they are creative in their way that they don't go the typical route of, like, I'm going to run upstairs and get killed in the dark. Like, they are smart about what they do, but they actually are just calling out all these other things at the same time. So don't come across if you haven't seen it and been like, well, that sounds cheesy that they're constantly talking about what it would do or wouldn't do. Like, no, that's completely not right. You have to watch it to see it to kind of fully understand it, but they do such a great job at that.
Also, other than being like a psychopathic killer, Billy was a terrible boyfriend.
For sure.
Yes.
Like,
awful.
that whole scene where he's basically like, I'm really sorry that your mother died horrifically a year ago, but, like, why won't you have sex with me?
Yes.
Yeah, like literally, I'm sorry your mom died, but my mom left my dad, and that's basically...
You gotta get over it.
That's basically the same thing.
That's basically the same thing.
It's like, yeah, your mom left. She didn't die, Billy.
Right. Oh, my God. That whole scene, I was just like, what?
But, I mean, and you can... This is, tell me if I'm out of line here. But this is true of high school students in general.
Oh, 100%.
They don't make the best decisions.
No, they don't. And they can't comprehend, like, long-term decision-making.
I mean, you look at this movie and you're, Randy, nice guy, funny.
Right.
He really wants to be with Sydney.
Right.
But she wants the bad boy.
Of course she does.
Of course she does. That
Right.
is not the best decision, but that's,
Right.
That's usually how it goes, though.
Yes. And I mean, like, most teenagers don't think in the long term. So he's
They
like,
don't.
it's been a year. Like, get over it.
It's like, you're lucky. You're in high school. You're lucky it lasted a year. I mean.
Oh, man. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. So funny. And then Stu and Tatum have this kind of, like, weird relationship. Like, they're kind of your typical, like, they're probably together one week, they break up the next week, then they're together, But she clearly has no idea that he's also a psycho. So
Yeah.
it's like, it's really interesting. It was like their friendship dynamic. Obviously, you don't get into it a lot, but I don't know. It's just like, would I know if not just my boyfriend, but like two of my closest friends were crazy. Like,
It's odd to say. And like,
killer crazy.
talking about like his girlfriend though, like something I really like about all of the characters in this is it's not traditional in the way that some older horror movies would be like, oh, it's like the dumb girl that's just so stupid that she doesn't catch anything and everything else. It's like, no, like all these characters are given like credibility to be real people. And it's not just some like,
Well,
I don't know.
Here's the thing.
I don't want to say something stupid.
Sydney is not a damsel in distress.
No,
No.
not at all.
She is never portrayed as a helpless girl who had no. She is legitimately, like, she holds her own. She's a fighter. I mean, when I say survivor, I mean, she survives this, obviously, but not because she had to be saved by, like, it was a group effort, yes, but she was not helpless on her own.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
she escaped Billy and Stu when they were literally right there in front of her.
Right.
Like, they were so busy stabbing each other, she saw the opportunity to move around,
Right.
hide, get into the the ghost face
Right.
costume and attack them or whatever. I mean, so Sydney is portrayed as literally like a hero in this movie because she is.
Right. Yeah. And even Tatum, like, I feel like
Again, she puts up a
it'd
fight.
be easier to make her like the dumb blonde, right?
For
but
sure.
she's clearly a really good friend. She seems very emotionally intelligent with like what Sydney is going through.
Yep.
She puts up a heck of a fight
She
in
does.
that garage, and I really like how all these characters are well-rounded
Yes.
for the most part, instead of just being, like, well, you got the jock, you've got the dumb girl, it's all, I think it's all really, really well done.
The other thing that I really think aged really well here is the portrayal of Woodsboro being a small town. When you see the sheriff and Dewey walk in the streets, I feel like they're walking in like Selma or Kinley,
Right.
or like Pine Level or something. Something with just some small shops there. They kind
I
of
love when the sheriff takes a cigarette break and Dewey has the ice cream.
ice cream break. Yes.
I was waiting because they keep going back and forth. And again, this is me where I've watched so much of the spoof movies in that time period that whenever the sheriff put his cigarette out on the floor, I kept waiting for Dewey to throw his ice cream cone down and like stomp it out.
Right.
Because it was in my brain. It's like, does that happen? I can't remember. They're mimicking each other right now. Is this going
Right.
to happen? And then it didn't.
Yeah. I also, honestly, halfway through the movie thought that Dewey was going to end up being the killer. Like, I thought he was going to have this sort of, like, flip persona where he was like, no one in this town takes me seriously, and they're going to see, like, what I can do. And I honestly, almost, like, I really thought David Arquette was going to be
Well,
I was
the
go ahead.
killer.
I was going to say the really cool thing you mentioned about like having your closest friends turn out to be serial killers or whatever. They explore that dynamic in Scream 2, where you have returning characters who survive this, and
Right.
you
Think
have,
how horrific
you have
the
Sid-
aftermath
you have
of this.
Sydney. The second one is takes place when they're in college.
Okay.
You have Sydney, who is dating but can't really fully trust her boyfriend because her last boyfriend turned out to be a
For
psychopath.
obvious reasons, right?
You have like Randy, you hanging out with a bunch of friends who, again, you don't know if your friends are killers or not. Because,
right.
You know, especially with more killings happening on the college campus,
Right.
you don't trust anybody. And so like they explore that dynamic of like who do you trust, who can you trust,
Right.
and then the idea that it could even be one of the original survivors is brought up because of the trauma they may have gone through. You know, like Dewey and Randy have this conversation, which they played this whole conversation in the trailer for that movie, which is really awesome. I'll show it to you when we get off. But Dewey's like, if you're a suspect, I'm a suspect. Well, let's move on.
Okay, well, now that we've established that.
So, what were you going to say, Kyle?
Well, like, Dewey is the one character that stands out a lot to me in comparison to the old Scary Movie spoof movie. Because he is a very prominent character in the spoof, and he is very, like...
Doofy.
He is.
Yeah, that's his name, Doofy.
And so they so much make fun of him that it made me really watch David Arquette's character in this to see, is he that crazy, or is this so much just overdone in the other one? And it made me look at him, at least try to take him more seriously in this time. Because he was so much made fun of in the other that I really paid more attention to him this time. And the thing is, too, like, David Arquette himself as an actor put so much into all these that he pretty much couldn't find a job forever after this, because it's like, he's a professional wrestler now, or semi-whatever. But he went through a lot
really
of this.
good.
He was.
And
a
the
lot of
character
these...
was actually a good cop.
Absolutely.
It was.
You know?
And he turns out to be, like, as the movies progress, like,
Right.
really credible.
And he's
as a cop,
also,
too.
like, funny. Like, when he
Yeah.
was like, I was 25 for a whole year.
Yeah.
I love the dynamic between Tatum and Dewey too, where like they're clearly siblings, and Tatum's like, "Come on, Dewey," and Dewey's like, "What did Mom tell you? When I wear the badge, you treat me like a man of the law."
Well, I love too.
Janitor's your superior, Dewey.
I love how, like, his relationship with Sydney is too, where he's like, he knows obviously he's grown up with her being like his sister's best friend for a very long time, and whenever he's nice to her or very protective of her, you also don't get the weird, creepy vibe of like, oh, he's trying to hit on her or save her to do
He
this.
is literally a protector.
He just cares.
Yes.
Like,
he cares, and it was never presented as something creepy.
no, and so I really like that about
Which
this.
honestly, if they had turned it on its head and him be the killer, that would have really thrown. Like,
Sure.
Oh my goodness.
Right. That's what I'm saying. I was like, oh my gosh, what if it's him? I did suspect everyone at some point.
Yeah, I mean,
sure.
The only
Yeah.
person you don't suspect is Sydney.
Yeah.
Like,
Really.
so I mean,
Because
everyone.
then I was like,
else-
what if it's Randy, because Randy wants her for himself?
Yep, and he's a big horror movie. But,
Yeah,
I mean,
he knows the
makes
rules.
sense. Like they literally, he knows the rules. They literally pointed the fingers at every possible character.
Yes.
It could have been Gail Weathers, who,
Yes.
She thinks Cotton was framed, so she's trying to get back at Sydney.
Well, she's
That's
also
right.
writing a book,
Yeah,
and so
writing a book,
and she
so-
already said like, what would happen if I, freed a man from prison for wrongfully?
Can-
how many copies of the book could I sell?
Exactly.
So it's like, how much of a book could you sell if you literally killed a bunch of people and then wrote a book about it? From a different person's perspective, or whatever.
It could have been like even like the sheriff. Whenever he puts the cigarette, you see the black boots, and like,
Oh, that's
I didn't get that.
right.
I was like, oh.
What if it's the sheriff?
What if it's the sheriff for some reason? I don't know what his motive would be. But then again, like they say, motive. Who needs motive?
Right.
I mean, what is motive? Anyway, so yeah, ultimately just I felt like this was. Y'all understand why I love this movie?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And I really like with the spooky season, coming upon us, the Halloween season upon us. I really want y'all to watch 2, 3, and 4.
I probably
I'm
will.
sure I will.
Yeah.
Just because I want to see y'all's reactions if y'all haven't seen them. So
I know I've seen them, but it's been even longer since I've seen them than probably I've seen the first one. So
and then,
Yeah.
then in January we can go watch Scream 5 together.
we can.
Oh, yeah.
Ivy doesn't like scary movies, so she probably won't go.
Okay.
But
It's a different style of movie though. Like,
Yeah.
there's some
Still-
comedy in there. She may come.
Honestly, I think that I say I don't like horror movies anymore because they've just gotten so like bloody and gross. And so it was nice to go back to something that
Sure.
was still scary without being like really truly disgusting. Like it had some jumpy moments. It had some like gore a little bit, but it was just really good. It wasn't too much.
Yeah.
was there anything that you like would nitpick about this movie, or anything that aged poorly, or just observations that like I'll just go ahead and say like one of mine is the principal, like played by the Fonz.
Right, yeah.
Not the best principal in my opinion.
No.
You know, like Sydney walks into the room and he kind of puts his hand on her. Like that.
He touches her chin.
He does, yes.
Yeah, that weirded me out. I started suspecting him of something.
You got the two students who were, running up and down the hallway in the costume, and he threatens to cut them open. And
he like with the scissors. He's like, it's just.
He says fairness would be to rip your insides out and hang you from a tree.
Yeah,
like he literally
he had some weird moments.
But then, but I will also contrast that with they make the announcement at the party. The principal was gutted in the school.
Right.
And they found his body hanging from the goalpost. How do they all respond? We gotta go see that! Everyone leaves the party to go see it. And I was like, wow, they must have
poor
really
guy. They must have really hated
Fonz.
him.
Yeah. Well, I think there's that part too, though, with it being a scary movie. It's part of the writer's job to make you constantly think about other people. So I totally agree. Like, he's a horrible principal, definitely does some really weird things. But it does make you think for a second, like, what if he is the guy? Like, for a split second, now you're thinking it's him.
Right.
Versus otherwise, you may not have.
I mean, obviously the fashion didn't age well.
Cellular phones.
Yeah,
Cellular phones.
I don't.
Could we have cloned the phone? Maybe I mean, that was literally a line in the movie. Like, could they have cloned his phone? I don't know. We're looking into it.
I was like, I don't even think was that technology available in the 90s?
I'm not sure.
Maybe to the NSA, but anyway, there wasn't. I couldn't find anything like really egregious. That wasn't like just a product of its time.
Yeah.
And
I would say too, like, it's the same way if you go back and watch any old movie, especially some of those things, at least like with cell phones or stuff. Because you go back and watch like old Halloween, like before some of that stuff existed, it's even more like, why don't you do this or why don't you do that? But so if you're young now and you're going and watching it, sure, there's probably going to be some things that you're like, well, that seems stupid or that seems dumb. But I think if you just go into it with like a clear mindset and not so much think about like it's happening today and more so during its time period, I don't think there's anything you like with that. And that is for me coming from a kid that from that time period that loves just seeing that type of thing. I really think it still overwhelmingly is a great movie where you can just go watch it.
Right.
And those small things don't necessarily get you. Sure, you may look at it as a teenager now and say like, look at that cell phone or cellular phone. Like, why doesn't everybody have one?
Right.
But if you can allow yourself to get past that.
Sheriff.
Yeah. If you can allow yourself to get past that, like, I think you'll still, like, the movie in general or as a whole, you're still going to be constantly, who's the killer? Is this person, that person?
I will say there was one moment, because I know they were trying to do, like, nods to other horror films. And for the most part, I thought they worked it in really well. Like, a lot of, like, talking about the rules, having Halloween actually be plain and talking about Jamie Lee as like the Scream Queen. But the one that really kind of like took me out, and I think it's because Scary Movie ended up coming out later, is when the principal goes out in the hallway, he hears a noise, and the janitor, whose name is Fred, is dressed like Freddy Krueger.
It's played by Wes Craven.
It is.
Yeah. Yes, that was a little much for me.
Yeah.
Like, that was almost kind of like a weird stutter step where I was like, that almost seems not too meta, but like too campy. Like, it got campy for just a hot second. And I was like, I mean, they were doing a pretty good job of like being meta and working it in, but I think that one, I know it was so Wes Craven could have a cameo, and it was really funny, but I was like, that almost seemed like too much. Like, you lost the tone for like a hot second.
And like I said, I think that does, or like you said, I think that goes with how Scary Movie came out, where they nitpicked and like pulled those things out to make them huge, or like those type of things.
Right.
So if we had never seen all these spoof movies of horror movies, I don't know if it would have done the same, but it definitely had that moment of like, oh, that's what this is, and that's Freddy Krueger, and it definitely takes you out of the movie for a moment. So I get that.
So here's a off-the-cuff question.
Okay.
We didn't talk about this. We're in the Scary Movie. We're in Scream.
Okay.
Where do we fall in the roles? Which one of us is killed early? Which one of us makes it to the end? Which one of us might be the psychopath killer? Which one of us, dies in the middle of the movie? Like, where do you think that each of us fall in the roles of this movie? And I'm going to start with Ashby.
I'm probably Tatum.
You're probably Tatum?
Like, I'm not the heroine, but I make it like to the midway point.
Don't kill him, Mr. Ghostface.
I want to be in the sequel. Yeah.
You would say that.
Which, by the way, also again talking about red herrings that aren't red herrings. She's like, Stu, is that you? You like being funny?
Yeah.
And actually, it probably was Stu.
Yeah.
You know, like that was a really interesting scene too, where you're like, well, she's actually ended up being right. You know. So yeah, I would probably be Tatum. I'd make it midway, like solidly midway through the movie, and then I would die fighting for my life.
Where would me and Kyle land?
I'm
gonna make her kill us off.
I'm sure. Like,
I think Kyle.
I think Kyle survives.
I think Kyle survives.
I think Kyle's
Yeah.
Randy.
I think
Kyle is
Kyle's-
Randy.
I don't know.
Yeah, I think Kyle. Well, no, I think Kyle survives. I think Kyle's more like Dewey.
Okay.
Like you think you saw him die, but like through sheer force of will, he survives his wounds. I think you're more like Randy. I think you make it almost to the end of the movie, and then while you're trying to tell someone to be careful, you get killed from like behind.
Well, Randy doesn't die.
And you're like, oh no, Eric.
Randy doesn't die.
Yeah, but you do.
Oh,
That hurts.
he pushes the knife a little bit harder. Into you.
Yeah, yeah.
I would be the guy, quote, like watching the movie and be like, come on.
Yeah,
totally-
yeah.
I get
He's
that.
right behind you, and then like,
Oh, right.
yeah.
Cool deal. Cool deal.
Just not to take us out of this, but for 1 second, that's one thing we didn't talk about. Is in that moment where they're watching the live feed in the
Right.
van.
There's a 30-second delay.
There's this 30-second delay. How awesome is that to be like, to think that far through as you're writing a movie, to be
Yes.
like, oh God, we got to help them. We're like, they're
Right.
coming. And then it's like, well, actually that happened 30 seconds ago and now
Right.
he's here. So
Yes.
I don't know. I thought it was good. So Eric, what do you think?
My first thought was that Ashby was Sydney.
Same. I
Like,
thought the same.
She's
Okay.
a fighter. She's not someone to take anyone's BS. I mean, that also lines up with Tatum, too. But I feel like Ashby's a survivor. I feel like I'm killed in the first scene. Like, I'm the boyfriend who gets killed on the pool deck.
Imagine, though, you've got flowers. Like, you're really happy to see your girlfriend.
Yeah, and I'm Stephen Orr. Yeah,
And then
sorry.
it's like,
I'm barely mentioned in the rest of the films. I mentioned one time in the second
right.
film, and that's it.
poor guy.
And then with Kyle. Kyle's interesting. I still think he's Randy. I think he's the nice guy. He's the good guy. But I think he survives this film. I do.
That or Kyle's stew. It really could go either way.
Yeah.
Depends on the day.
It really
That's
does.
true.
It really
Yeah.
does. I'm really
Kyle
glad.
would be the psychopath that was like literally
You had no idea.
dying,
There I
and
was.
he's like,
Leave her
my
alone.
mom and dad are going to be so mad at me.
Yep.
Wow. Good stuff. Well,
See, y'all think highly of me. Like, for myself, I think I probably pass out or die of a panic attack in the first scene. Like, there's a guy on the house. I'm panicking at that point. He shows up with a knife. He probably doesn't even stab me. I just hit the ground.
see,
Like,
there's characters in these sequels that I feel like you line up
Yeah.
with better than you do in the first movie.
maybe. I don't know if I make it there, though, because I literally think, like, he probably stabs me after I'm dead.
The
just
guy
on
like
the floor.
appears in like the full door.
Yep.
And Kyle's like, oh God, it's happening. And
Yep.
then he just like,
Falls down.
There's
That
a
I would probably like throw things at him and try to fight, but at some point I'm giving up and just dying myself. Like, look, you don't have to do anything. Let me just hit the floor, then
Yeah.
stab me.
Yeah.
Like,
Yes.
Kyle's just like slowly dying of like a panic attack on the kitchen floor as the popcorn like pops out
yeah,
of the thing onto him.
into my mouth
Yeah.
like, as I'm dead.
Yeah.
I feel like it'd go either way. I'd either die that way or like my adrenaline would kick in and I would just go like nuts.
Yeah.
And I'd probably have a lot of stab wounds. I think Ashby definitely makes it. That was my first thought too. Was she's Sydney? She's gonna give like, I can see Ashby getting the phone call in her house and being like, "Okay, screw you, hang
Right.
up the phone. I don't
Right.
care who you are. You're not scaring me. Whatever," and just not deal with it. I feel like you are. I feel like Eric makes it, or at least towards the end anyway. I feel like you're not a person that dies early because you think really good about things or like deep into things. So I think you're going to really think a lot into this. Not many you're going to figure it out because multiple times we were all wrong in this movie. But like, I think you're going to be more
true.
aware of what's happening. You're not going to
Yeah.
be one that's like, let's all get together and party, because you're like, no, people are dying here. I'm going to sit at home and figure this out. And you're coming with me because I'm not doing this by myself. Like, so I feel like you may lead a whole crew of people to live longer. I'm not sure.
I'll be the group that doesn't go to the party, and the next day is like, oh, half our classmates are dead. See what you get?
Yep.
I told y'all.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but
It says it right here in the rules.
Yep.
Alcohol, drugs, dead.
oh, so good stuff. Good stuff.
Oh, I wanted to talk about the fourth rule that
Yes.
they sort of talk about, but he doesn't make it an official rule. But I think it becomes one in later movies.
Yes.
Headshots only.
Headshots only. Yes.
Yes.
You can't kill the
Right.
killer
Right.
by just stabbing them or shooting them. You've got to hit them in the head.
Yes.
At least,
Or like decapitation or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fire, drowning, none of that works.
No.
Yeah.
Yep. And that plays a role.
Yeah. And then
I mean,
Sydney's like, cool, boom, headshot.
Mm-hmm.
not in my movie.
Yeah, exactly. Ugh. What a boss.
What a boss. And she only gets bossier as the films go
Yeah.
on. So.
Well, I mean, you know.
Well, you got to with everything
Look,
else.
if I
he's
kept
dealing with.
surviving that kind of mess, I would be like, look, listen to me. I got this.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Do y'all have fun facts?
I've got a
No.
couple.
Okay,
I
I
forgot to
do
look them
too. You mentioned Scary Movie earlier.
Uh huh.
The original title of Scream was Scary Movie.
It was.
So that's where the parody film got its name from, was Scary Movie. But they were listening to the Michael Jackson song Scream, and they both liked the title for the horror movie. So.
Okay.
Erica reminded me of this last night because I'd forgotten all about it. But a couple years ago, we were at NC Comic Con and Henry Winkler was there, the Fonz, and he got brought up like he doesn't have any credits in this movie, and they said the reason why was because they didn't like Happy Days was still on reruns, everything else. Everybody knew him as the Fonz, and so they didn't want his face or his name anywhere related with the movie, where either people were going to think it's a funny, cheesy movie because it's the Fonz, or also take away from anybody like. To people not to take it serious and think it's the guy from Happy Days. It's the Fonz in this movie. So he has no credits in this movie at all. We watched to the end. And I think the director or someone even said, or maybe even Henry Winkler said, like at the end of the movie, because all the main characters, they do their little like flashcard where it's like, so-and-so played by so-and-so, It said they didn't want you to go through everything you just went through. And then all of a sudden, the principal played by the Fonz. Like, they didn't want that connection there. Like, he's there in the movie and you get it, but you may not. It doesn't pull you out. Versus advertisement-wise, they did not want him anywhere near any pictures, anything like that, and his name's not attached to it at all. So,
Cool. Another fun fact I have, Drew Barrymore, we talked about how she was all over the marketing. Part of that's because she was Sydney. She was originally cast as Sydney. And she changed her mind 5 weeks before production was set to begin. She suggested she play Casey to subvert audience expectations that a star of her stature would survive the movie. Because she knew, Drew Barrymore's in this. Of course, she's going to make it the whole way through. Would be the expectation. She's like, no. Let's turn it upside on its head. And they went with it. So then they immediately started approaching other actresses before they landed on Neve Campbell. But Brittany Murphy, Reese Witherspoon, Alicia Watt were all kind of considered for that role. But Drew Barrymore, she worked for 5 days of production, and that was it. I mean, and it turned out to be a master move. So,
for what I saw, it said Scream was partially inspired by a real life event.
yes.
The writer Williamson was saying, I was watching this Barbara Walters. Oh no, we're dead. No, we're good. It said, I was watching this Barbara Walters special on Gainesville, Florida murders, and CNN back in that doesn't make sense.
1992.
No, he told them in 1998. Sorry, my little interview clip from MTV was wrong. It says, I was getting so spooked, I was being scared out of my mind. During the commercial break, I heard a noise, and I had to search the whole house. I went to the living room, and a window was open, and I had been in this house for 2 days, and I'd never noticed that the window was open. So I got really scared. I went to the kitchen, got a butcher knife, got the mobile phone, and I called a buddy of mine. He said that buddy of his being David Blanchard, and he started asking him about scary movies, and the opening scene of Scream was born. One thing led to another. I went to bed that night so spooked, I had nightmares, and I woke up at 3 or 4 in the morning and started writing the opening scene to Scream.
Cool.
Yeah, there's some really good, just FYI, if you're interested, there's some pretty good podcasts about that. It's the Gainesville Ripper.
Yes.
And if you are interested in like the real life,
Sure.
case of that, you can find some really good one-off podcasts to explain that situation.
The last fun fact I have is that they were originally going to shoot at a high school in Santa Rosa, California. Santa Rosa High School. But they got approval from the school's administration beforehand. But then the school board banned the production weeks before the shoot began over concerns that the script glorified violence. They literally, I think, put in the credits usually they thank you to so-and-so, thank you to so-and-so. They literally put no thanks to the Santa Rosa High School City School Board.
Wow. Yeah.
The only other thing, it was something that I thought about while watching it last night, was where did this mask come from? Was it a pre-existing thing? Was it not? Because you have all other horror movies, or other horror characters that have these specific masks. So, like Ghostface, where did he come from? So I looked it up, and it said one of the producers, when they were scoping out different places for the movie to be made at, they came across this mask in one of the locations. And so they brought it back to Wes Craven's attention. They really liked it because before in the script, it was just written a person with a mask on, or like a ghost-like mask or something. But they found this mask. They really liked it. And I guess they started working with the company to see, because it was a standard Halloween store mask that a certain company made in like a horror line of masks that they made for Halloween time. And so they went and tried to make a deal with that company. I think they had already started making the movie at that point. So what they had done was taken the mask and made their own version of it, where they changed just enough of it to not get sued for it. They later on made the deal with the company and were able to use it for the rest of the movie. But if you go back and watch the opening scene with Drew Barrymore, the mask is slightly different than the rest of the movie. And the same way when Henry Winkler's in there, that mask is slightly different as well, where that was one of the ones that the, I guess, prop company or whatever had made. But the rest of the movie, they just used the mask. And I think going forward in the other movies, the same company, like production company, they bought those masks from them. Or not production, but the just Halloween mask makers. And then I think they did say, like, the robes and everything, the actual seamsters and stuff for the company did make, I think it says like $700 or so per robe per character, or however many they had. Because I think they sewed in, they said like almost like reflective or silver, like really bright pieces in it, so that when light hit it, it would glow a little bit or do things. So either way, it was an actual just Halloween mask that became iconic because of this movie. So
good stuff.
Cool.
Anything else we want to add on Scream?
I think we're good.
I hope y'all watch Scream 2, Scream 3, and Scream 4 soon so we can talk about it, y'all.
This was a Scream.
Ha-ha.
Ha-ha. That's the name of the movie. Roll credits. Roll credits. Oh, good stuff. All right, well, as always, we want to thank Ricky Lyles for his contributions to our podcast. And we want to thank you, the listener, for coming back and listening to us. Hopefully you enjoyed this podcast. And you're enjoying everything we're doing with pop culture in our holiday season. Until next time, stay as cool as the other side of the pillow. We'll see you next time on the What the What Podcast.
What the What?
Bye.